Weather is unpredictable. To some extent, I agree with that, but the severity and the extremes of the fluctuations of the weather just can't be denied.
Climate change is not just changing weather patterns, it's the increase of extreme weather patterns as a result of a changing climate.
The strongest piece of evidence in support of the reality of climate change is to look at the atmospheric concentrations of CO2 since the Industrial Revolution, the late 1800s. And scientists have done a very good job of documenting the fact that we are at unprecedented levels of concentration that have never been experienced before, and make the connection directly to the human cause of those concentrations due to our activities.
Most people feel that climate change has nothing to do with them currently until it affects them personally. So until they feel, wow, this is actually having an impact on my life, on my finances, on my stress and my mental health, then I think that's the point where they'll come together. And my response to that is absolutely, let's start adapting right now.
People used to say global warming, and now they say climate change. And I'm really grateful they do that because it is change. It's more volatility. We talk about the 5-year flood or the 10-year flood or the 100-year flood. It seems to be happening more frequently. And the real question is why? But the question after that is, so what do we go do?
No matter what you call it, 97% of the world's scientists agree that we're the cause of climate change, and the time to act is now. While governments debate about how to tackle climate change on a global scale, some cities are starting their own energy revolution.
So we're here in Chicago, which means we're on the shores of Lake Michigan. And when you think about fresh water in the world, this is it. It's the Great Lakes. And it's a big part of our heritage and how we think about things. We have 26 miles of lakefront. It's kind of spectacular to be in the beach and look up at these skyscrapers. It's really a unique geography that we have been able to build on and leverage for years. And we want to make sure that the generations to come have an opportunity to do that as well. Power can come from a variety of sources, and not everyone knows where their mix is. Community choice aggregation is an approach where the city is able to negotiate the power price and mix on behalf of residents. And that's something that was on the ballot here in Chicago, and our residents voted for that. We were able to use that then to create a mix that was coal-free. And so that's a really important opportunity here in Chicago. When the mayor came in a couple years ago, there were actually 2 working coal-fired power plants in Chicago, and those have since closed down. And we've been able to build on that, and we now offer coal-free power to our residents.
That energy remix happened with no controversy. It saved residents up to 12% on their monthly power bills and reduced the city's carbon footprint by 16% overnight. Now the goal is to reduce carbon 80% by 2050.
Chicago has had a really strong position on environment for a while. And we've got a very near-term action agenda called Sustainable Chicago 2015, which lays out literally 7 areas of focus, 24 goals, so it's 24/7, and focusing on building this great, livable, competitive, sustainable city.
There's no light switches in these offices. Everything is done by remote control via the occupancy sensor on the wall.
We know that most of the emissions that come out of Chicago are related to buildings, so 71%, and it's heating, cooling, and operating buildings. We've got a great partnership with private buildings. So all of this is called Retrofit Chicago. And we've had millions of square feet of private buildings all commit to at least a 20% improvement in energy efficiency. So those are big places that people visit. But it's using less, you save money, it reduces the environmental impact, and then it often makes your homes or businesses more comfortable. We actually have the most wind companies headquartered here of any city in North America.
10 years ago, in 2004, we had 0 wind in Illinois. We had nothing. Since then, we now have nearly 4,000 megawatts of wind in Illinois. That's exponential growth. 4,000 megawatts of wind is the equivalent amount to power over 1 million homes for an entire year. Your average person is not going to be able to put a wind turbine on the top of their roof. Solar is much more, accommodating to the average homeowner. Compared to 3 years ago, it's much less expensive to install solar. Solar will work anywhere. Even in the north, you can put solar on your house and get value. Little known fact is that Chicago only gets about 20 minutes less sunshine than Florida. And in fact, everywhere in the United States has better solar radiation, meaning you get more solar during the day than in Germany. And Germany has more solar installed than the rest of the world combined.
Here in Chicago, we were able to create a one-day permit if a resident wants to put solar on his or her home. So to do something like that, you have to come to the city, and there's a process there. And it used to be 30 days or more. And we want to make it easier. So for a standard pitched roof in Chicago, it's now 1 day. We actually even reduced the permit fee. And so that's an example of how all of us are working together to make it easier for residents to have the choices that they want as they're thinking about their home, their job, and their future.
The average person can do a lot to reduce their carbon footprint. Our electricity sector is responsible for 30% of the carbon dioxide that we put into the air. Our transportation sector is responsible for another 30%.
So Chicago's a great transportation city. And then we've been adding to the transportation system. We are just outside of City Hall, and we are standing at one of our 300 Divvy bike stations. So these are a few of our 3,000 bikes. We don't have them all in one place because people are using them all across the city. So it's actually pretty easy. In fact, someone's about to ride by on a Divvy. So watch, he'll check his app, which will tell him where an open Divvy dock is. So we're here. This is City Hall, and then here's a station, here's a station, here's a station. You hop in, you stick your key fob, you pop off your bike, and then it's just part of your day.
While some cities are taking a new look at clean energy use, others are starting from the ground up.
Morgan County 911, where's your emergency?
This is Sandy McKenzie, and I've just spotted what I think is a tornado over toward the Woods Bend area, and it's moving fast.
Okay, ma'am. Just go to the safe area, okay?
West Liberty Police Department, they're everywhere. Tornadoes are everywhere.
Oh, my God.
West Liberty, Kentucky, in the heart of coal country, has experienced bizarre and extreme weather changes in the last few years.
On March the 2nd, 2012, the city of West Liberty was hit by an EF3 tornado, something that has never happened in our area.
The tornado started up that hill near the hospital and roared down through downtown, pretty much destroying the downtown area, leveling it. Millions of dollars of property damage, lost lives, 800 people were displaced. But what it did to the community emotionally was something different. It really united the community in a way that tragedy sometimes turns into opportunity.
We want to make West Liberty inviting for young entrepreneurs and also for people to come back and raise their families.
Greensburg, Kansas is another example of a small town with a similar idea. Now, they did theirs first, but they were destroyed in a similar way through tornadoes, and they rebuilt as a green town. And they've demonstrated that not only are they saving residents on their utility bills, but they're now a place where people want to visit to check out this model village. And they are a model for the rest of the country, and that's helped boost their local economy as well. We hope the same thing happens to West Liberty.
We're in a region that is cold. We are eastern Kentucky. The coal fields have supported a lot of families. Coal severance here is still continues to fund a lot of projects that we have here in this town, in this county.
I worked as an underground coal miner for about 6 months in 2005 to 2006. I still miss the mines, and part of me wishes I had stayed in it a bit longer, but the fact is, at this point, there are almost no jobs in mining around here. And the landscape has just changed so much in the past 4 to 5 years that we really need to be thinking about new alternatives. Coal can be a very contentious issue, especially in central Appalachia, and I personally want to work to change that. I don't think it helps anybody to have this conflict-oriented mindset of coal miners versus tree huggers.
People think that there's a natural dichotomy. Either you're for coal or you're for clean energy, and anybody on one side or the other is the enemy. And that's been the topic of the so-called war on coal. And our politicians like to get that out there because it stirs up votes, it raises the money. Interest groups like to talk in the extremes because it's a way for them to fundraise. But the fact is, America's energy future is going to depend on all of the above. We need to have coal, we need to have natural gas, and we need to have solar, geothermal, all of the different types of energy technologies for the U.S. to be energy efficient and for us to deal with the imminent issues of climate change.
There's no reason to think that by installing a solar panel installation on a surface mine just like this, that it would be putting miners out of work. We can take people who were electricians in coal mines and train them to install solar panels. We can take people who ran heavy equipment on surface mines and train them to do reforestation projects. There are so many ways that we can utilize the existing skill sets. I think it's important for people to understand that it's not an either or. In the end, what's important is to have real options for Appalachia. So I hope that we can all try to find our common ground and just try to do what's the best for this region and for the people of this region.
People understand that if we use energy more wisely, if we're more conservative and we take care of our resources better, then that's a win-win for everybody. After this West Liberty initiative was developed, I approached my friends at the Clinton Global Initiative, and they got excited enough to invite the West Liberty Project to their main events. That kind of publicity, that helps us identify partners from around the country. We've found so far people who are engaged in other disaster recovery projects. We've found people who are deeply involved in energy efficiency projects. We've found people who are in rebuilding rural America, and we're finding people who are interested in providing financial help for this effort. And our West Liberty Project has benefited tremendously. Our next step is to raise $500,000 to build 4 site-built homes that will be zero net energy, using solar, geothermal, energy efficiency elements to ensure that the families that live there won't pay a dime in energy bills, which is pretty exciting. And then we're going to be putting together a energy efficiency dashboard that will be monitoring all the energy use in all of these homes that will be downtown, as well as on the web for folks to watch those savings. We're hoping to get partners all over the country join us in helping make West Liberty a model for the rest of the country.
Green forest work has a model for restoring old mining sites by replanting native grasses and trees.
We're standing on a mountaintop removal site that spans several thousand acres, actually. The species that are planted here after the mining is finished are really meant to stabilize the ground and control erosion to some extent. Back before 1978, coal companies weren't necessarily required to do reclamation, so a lot of times they would finish with the surface mining and they would just leave everything kind of a big loose mess. And there used to be some pretty serious issues with landslides onto people's homes that lived down at the foot of the mountain or nearby the mining operation. At first it was just plant something that'll grow quickly and easily that will supply some kind of food source for wildlife. But what we found is that the amount of species diversity that those kinds of species will support is way, way, way less than what was here before. So that's the focus of green forest work, is to come back to these lands that were already surface mined and already reclaimed and to use a special approach to be able to get the native species growing back and to have a much greater amount of carbon being stored in native high-value hardwood trees. If you're concerned about your carbon footprint, one of the most direct and effective ways you can address that is to physically put some trees in the ground.
More people are dealing with more volatile weather and learning that they have to take matters into their own hands.
I had grown up here. I came from the city, moved here when I was in 6th grade, moved away, came back. It's this little Mayberry. I remember the first and the second flood. They happened at night, and you start to see the water coming from behind the property. That's it. You don't even know where it's coming from at first, but you know it's starting behind the garage and it's rolling closer to the house. You're just trying to figure out, how do I keep it out of the house? On purpose, we bought a house not on a floodplain. The nearest creek is about 6 to 8 blocks from here. I don't have flood insurance. We thought it was a crazy fluke because you see on the news, there's all this building. What we started to notice was that with each flood, we would think, oh, they're expanding in Oak Forest. There's all this new construction, all these new subdivisions. We thought there was a reasonable, rational answer for the floods. We've been dealing with the flooding for over 2 decades. This year has been the most outrageous year. We've had 9 floods in the last 15 weeks. We really don't have any recourse. Each flood has a different price tag. They average from $20,000 and up. I just talked to somebody the other day that said $34,000 was the last flood they had. So I've had floods that the cost was over $70,000, but I've been through 17 floods now. There is sewage, worms, all kinds of gross, disgusting things. You have to pull the woodwork off. You have to take the carpet out. This is a combination of sewer water. So it's not just storm water, it's sewer water. It runs through multiple garages. It goes through lawnmowers. It goes through cars, gas tanks, solvents, cleaning agents, chemicals, fertilizers. It goes through everything that is in every garage it hits on the way here. Now it's in my house. It's not acceptable that this is happening. It just makes me mad. When it rains, that's it. We don't sleep. Or, as funny as this sounds, we sleep in shifts. This is what we do every time it rains, which has been a whole heck of a lot lately, so we don't have a life. And we don't go on vacation. Nobody on this block goes on vacation. Nobody. You can't leave. It's a constant state of fear.
Today, up to 1 in 3 people is affected each year by flooding. According to Climate Central, by 2100, sea levels may be as high as 6.5 feet above 1992 levels, putting the homes of 7.8 million Americans at risk of being flooded. You can go online to see if your area is at risk.
There isn't a city right across the United States that isn't affected in one way or another by flooding or drought. That's New York, Philadelphia, DC, Boston, Memphis, everywhere. They're having these problems about managing water. All the weather trends, all the mapping, the data from the National Climate Change Assessment all shows that the problem's just going to get worse, and it's going to get worse more rapidly. The Center for Neighborhood Technology is a nonprofit. We're based in Chicago, and we work nationally. And we describe ourselves as an urban innovation laboratory. So we come up with smart solutions to what we call often wicked problems, very serious problems that are complex to solve. We help change people's lives and then use their energy and enthusiasm to tell a bigger story about the changes that we need to make. According to the National Climate Change Assessment, the number of severe weather events has actually increased within the Midwest by 31% over the last 50 years. Rain Ready is a program that was developed in partnership with the City of Chicago. We help communities get rain ready. Our first action is to help them set up a resident action group. They need to be organized, and they need to document the story, they need to take photos, and they need to get maps, they need to speak to agencies. And then from that, we will start to do property surveys where we'll get an idea of just how widespread the problem is and then develop a plan of action.
After the first 15 floods, that's when I made my first phone call to CNT, and I talked to Harriet. I actually think I told her this. I can't believe you're still talking to me. I can't believe you're still listening. Nobody ever listens. She was so understanding. And just that day, you know, asking me for, you know, some of the pictures, just wanting to hear the story was probably the most remarkable part of it. And from there, she just continued to give me ideas and opportunities and point me in the right direction. One thing I can say for certain is we wouldn't be where we are without. There's no denying that something's different. Seasons aren't the same, and what happens during those seasons aren't normal. Climate change is real to me, and climate change is certainly very real to my neighbors. Call it what you want to call it, but there's no denying that it's happening.
Many businesses are addressing climate change and giving consumers a way to have a positive impact. Auto manufacturers are taking another look at electric vehicles and expanding their offerings.
When I look ahead to the future of transportation in the U.S., I'm excited about a rapid transition to much more cleaner vehicles. Specific to electric vehicles, just in the last couple of years, we've seen explosive growth in their adoption. We now have close to 250,000 electric vehicles on the road. It's still a small fraction of the total number that's out there, but the rate at which the adoption is accelerating is very, very exciting.
We're not going to give up our cars. That we know for sure. I first heard about electric vehicles about 3 years ago. I wasn't skeptical of the concept as much as it was the questions about range and especially about price. Now, as the cost has gone down, the range has increased. So there's two significant factors that are helping people get towards a more sustainable car future.
We believe there's a segment of the population for whom EV ownership is just not practical because they have no place to charge at night. These are people that live in apartments, they live in condos, or they park on the street, and they just don't have the ability to charge at night. However, if those same people commute to a workplace and that employer offers charging at the workplace, in many cases for free, all of a sudden EV ownership becomes much more practical and attractive for those people. We've done some quick scenarios to look at the economic impact of that, and depending on what assumptions you use, it can translate into almost a 3 to 5% raise for somebody that's driving a standard car today to their workplace to switch to an electric vehicle, drive to their employer where they charge for free. It's real money. So 5-10 years from now, I see millions of electric vehicles on the road. I see a widespread charging network that's available to the public on roadways, at employers' parking lots, in apartment buildings, in homes, et cetera, and overall much higher fuel efficiency of the entire fleet of the U.S.
The ability to take a road trip is certainly one of the top things that people ask when they come into our stores and galleries. How do I take a road trip in this vehicle? What if I want to go outside of that 265-mile range? So Tesla is addressing that with the Supercharger network. It's the world's fastest charging technology. It's going to put a half a charge on Model S in as little as 20 minutes. So you pull into one of these stations, it's completely free, plug your car in, and in 20 minutes or 40 minutes, you're ready to get back on the road and drive to the next station. A map of all the stations currently in the US. But you can see that we now have a network that spans from Los Angeles all the way across the country to New York. We're working on this second cross-country route, which will come right through here. It's bi-coastal, connecting Boston down to Miami. And then we also have San Diego, California, all the way up to Whistler, British Columbia. And we're just starting to fill out the rest of the country and add density.
There is a perception that EVs are just for the wealthy because there are some very popular electric vehicles that are, quite frankly, very expensive and not accessible to everybody. One example of a very accessible and available electric vehicle that's not very expensive is the Nissan Leaf. Nissan aggressively dropped the price of the Leaf last year. I saw just yesterday a 24-month lease for $119 a month, which is very affordable. And when you combine a low initial purchase price or lease price with the fact that you don't have to buy gasoline anymore, and the fact that electricity in our area is relatively cheap, and in many cases, employers are offering free electricity to their employees, it becomes very economical. So To the question of, is it just for the wealthy? Increasingly, no, that's not the case. As we see electric vehicles becoming more and more affordable, as we see prices of gasoline continuing to rise, it will become very clear that adopting an electric vehicle is good not only for the environment, but good for your wallet. And I think the path to a broader, sustainable society often starts with economics.
If we don't solve climate change, we won't be able to farm the way that we farm. We won't be able to provide food the way that we need it. And we won't be able to live the life that we've built for ourselves. So future generations really depend on us solving this issue.
I think a bigger difference will be made much quicker if more people band together.
Making change locally is essentially how all change gets made. So absolutely, change is local, but change is also something that we all have a part of, and it can be in your daily life at home, your daily life at work, or what you're teaching your kids. It's also a source of fun. You can get something done today, so why not do it?